Welcome, welcome, my friends, to the Process Group Pentagon. Today, we're going to take a look at scope. And in this episode, I really want you to do some of the thinking. Okay, so hit the pause button and just get to it. Ask yourself the question, how does scope relate to integration? It gives it a plan, a scope management plan, also a scope baseline, also work performance information. See that? How does scope relate to risk? How does scope relate to schedule? Does it? Yeah, we could have scope related risks, and that's why in identify risk, if you go to 11.2, you are going to see mention made of some of those artifacts from scope. It's really that simple once you know how it works. So if you go down, we can see we've got requirements documentation. We've also got our scope baseline as an input, and we've got our requirements management plan as an input as well. So as you take a look at these, just open up the book and see if there's any relationships. What about between scope and cost? Well, that will be time to open to 7.3 and to say, is there anything from scope here? All right, we have the scope baseline. It says on page 250 of the 6th edition, the scope baseline includes a project scope statement, WBS, and WBS dictionary details for cost estimation and management. Sometimes you just even know it implicitly because it makes sense. There should be some input of scope into this to be able to get the budget. What about quality? Of course, because that's what you're doing. You're building a deliverable. You should definitely be factoring scope in. And vice versa, when we talk about the scope, quality could also dictate the scope. If there are certain quality standards, then that means you got more scope to do. Same thing with resources. Based on the scope, we might need certain resources. How does scope relate to stakeholder? How does stakeholder relate to scope? Stakeholders, they dictate those requirements, those needs. So there's going to be a back and forth for sure in terms of that. You talk about procurements based on the scope, we're going to procure stuff. Talk about communications, the manner of communications that you decide to carry out might bring about certain scope. So it's a two-way street. And this is how I need you to think about this stuff. That's it. I'm not after long lines of explanations. That's not what I'm after. But I'm after you feeling comfortable by looking at two knowledge areas and for you to be able to say this is how they're interrelated. Or process groups, this is how they're interrelated. And anything else. There's so many ways you could use this Pentagon to understand project management at a whole new level and to learn in your own way. Learn at your own pace. Draw the Pentagon, draw out the 10, and begin asking yourself, how does this relate to this? How does that relate to that? When you're in doubt, do a little bit of research in the PMBOK guide. But if you get the overarching idea, you're good to go. You may not need any other episodes. That's it. Start studying, start looking for relationships, and start charting your own course. All right. Thank you for joining me in this series. I wish you all the best on your exam. Talk to you soon.